In the yellow light of the risen sun floating in the southeast notch, I come walking toward the river over frosted moss and crisping grass. I stand to listen closely to the speaking wind's low moan. Consider the wisdom of loss, noting weather wrinkles in gray wood, cracks in lichened stone. Pause to taste momently the ringed, packed potency in things, to sense the arc of willful chance, turn to the new sun's glare off the ice-framed moving mirror of the river, and just for this brief contracted space, hearing and feeling the cold wind zinging past, I'm alone, and not alone. Enveloped, once and all, in peace, at peace, and of a piece once more with everything. My name is John Rule. My wife Margaret and I bought this place in 1963. We were scholar gypsies and we wanted a permanent home base, a piece of land where we could look at the universe and really enjoy life. We were actually afraid at first whether we could make a living here. But we did manage it and we loved it. We were here together for 40 years until I had to put Margaret into a nursing home. She passed away in August of 2009. And we looked around for the cheapest places we could find in the northern tier of Arkansas counties because we love this area, this part of the state and of the nation. We got county maps and drew circles around every place that there seemed to be little or nothing in the way of human habitation. Then we went to those places, camped out, and then asked if there was any land for sale. And that's how we found these 151 acres in the Upper Frog Bayou drainage, which we could afford because it was so cheap. At first, we bought this part, where the house sits, this quarter of a quarter, 40 acres, for about $3 or $4 an acre. It cost us quite a bit more to get the other half, but eventually we did get the other half, and the total price was $2,200. It has a little bit of everything one would wish. Heavy timber, nice clear running stream, 3 mountains, about 20 acres of bottomland. I had all kinds of plans for it. Had some idea of a sort of 19th century farm in mind. Everywhere I look, I can see things that did not go as I wished. But On the other hand, most of the wonderful things that have happened have been emotional. They've been developmental in me and in Margaret. This is where we were happiest and where we had resolved to stay as long as we possibly could. We had never had any really permanent situation in the years that we'd been teaching, almost 20 years in total. Margaret and I would come and work on it whenever we had vacations or whenever we could get free on holidays. We'd arrive here in the night, maybe from 400 miles away, and get busy on everything. Purify yourself. Crawl over mountains in a blue truck. Bark sweet gum trees, lumber through fords, scratch out chickadees at dusk from their bittersweet vines. And breaking a final tangle in weeds and moonlight, light running, pause to kiss the house door, make for the rock run where water freezes starshine beneath the mountains back. Lie down and pull the chill clean over you. Tie on and compress the grainy rocks. Take on stone hardness like a granddaddy crawdad with blue-shot claws. Try and make it to Frog Bayou. The way is hard, breath comes in shudders. Mounting the cold slope, all is taken. Reaching the top, the grape bloom air burns in the chest, all is given back. Try to make it to Frog Bayou. Each day spins the planet down the track. God alone knows the circle back. When we first came in here, we'd been told that this place was up here and that no one had lived here for, 20 years. There was quite a bit of wreckage from the old house, old rough sawn boards and beams, and I managed to put together this particular habitation, which is not much, but it was certainly a lot of fun for us despite that. After we got up the little shack that we camped out in for 10 years, we had to eat and take care of ourselves in the meantime, so we started cooking on these two big rocks that are left up here in the corner of the old scrap kitchen. My wife was a very good sport about cooking and camping out, and Margaret was always willing to try something like that. We were scared to try anything before we came here because we thought we would need more money, but it turned out that basically we just needed to be willing to do it. We did enjoy doing a lot with pseudo living off the land, and we tried a little bit of everything. We got around to trying wheat and rye, which did very successfully. Any type of wild fruit and so forth in season. Margaret did quite a lot with that sort of thing. And then eventually, of course, we got a cow, and I milked for 10 years, and she made 5 kinds of cheese. Margaret was such a wonderful cook and provider that we did a wonderful amount of entertaining for not having any utilities at all. As time wore on, it seemed that we needed some place more permanent to get into, and so we wound up living in the little house. I think my father said when he first saw it, he said, "Well, if every rock was gold, son, you'd be a millionaire." So apparently I did too good a job, I suppose. But he came up and helped me in 1973 and helped lay up double walls of rock. Some of it river rock and some of it just what we'd picked up around here. The roof and the framing of the house were discarded beams from an old rice mill in Stuttgart. They're virgin pine and about 4 inches thick by 12 inches wide and 14 feet long. So most of those were cut with a chainsaw into the framing for all the openings in the house as well as the roof. It has a sodded roof. It takes a very good support for something like that. The sod has helped immensely to defeat the loss of heat from inside. Usually it runs about, and I've kept records, I keep more or less daily records of weather and all. It's 10 degrees difference, 8 to 10 degrees difference between inside and outside all the time. There is no electricity, of course, except in storms, as I say. So there are few or no utilities except for lighting, and I hope eventually to solve that with solar panels on the roof or something like that. It's not perfect, but it's the first real home I've had since I was taken away from the home farm in eastern Kansas in 1936. I was born December 12, 1930, 8 miles from Ottawa, Kansas. One of the first things I remember is when they took me, I was still in my baby shirt, to get a family portrait. The next thing that happened that I can remember was that we came down to the Ozarks in 1932 or so. But the next thing that happened was that I and my mother were going back to Kansas. She said that I was to be a good boy, and she got in the car and it drove off. I asked grandmother what reason my mother gave her for leaving me with her and leaving Dad, and the ostensible reason that she gave was that it would kill my father if she took me with her. The actual reason, I believe, was that she was in love with another man. Of course, I loved grandmother, I loved the farm. But in 1936, my dad came back from his various jobs that he'd had to take with my new mother and picked me up, and we drove all the way back to the East Texas oil fields in her Model T. Suddenly they were poorer than ever. His dad was looking for a job to supplement the newspaper bundle delivery route. He met a farmer who offered them a place to live in a tenant house. What I'm writing about now is about 10 to 12 years of nomadic existence, going from one place to another. My father used to boast that I was in and out of 20 schools in a year and a half. It wasn't actually until about the 5th grade that I began to be at home in school and all the different schools that I had attended. And then after finishing high school in Stuttgart, Arkansas, I got a small journalism scholarship to the College of the Ozarks in Clarksville, Arkansas. And unfortunately, there was some kind of a scandal in the journalism department that year, and that ended the program. And the next year, I came up to the University of Arkansas with $25. I had to work in order to go to school, and I decided at that time to go into the Army and get the GI Bill. I didn't conceive that there could be other very difficult situations arising from Army service. I got through all right and got out in January of '55. I was behind Margaret several years because of my Army service and my financial difficulties. Margaret, meanwhile, was already working on a doctorate in English, but decided to switch into languages with a major in German and comparative literature. Margaret happened to be in one of my seminars in English literature, and she attracted the attention of everyone because she was had such an incisive penetrating mind and was such a vibrant personality that she communicated beautifully. We had so much in common except for, of course, a 16-year age difference and the fact that she had 4 children. I was quite struck by their family life. The fact that Margaret could make such a successful family situation, keep them healthy and happy, and I was really impressed by what they were able to do on very little, almost nothing really. I had never met anyone as vibrant and wonderful to share life with as this person was. At the same time, I was not really certain that this, would work, so I had to go off to teach and survey the possibilities elsewhere, and I did that at Idaho State for 59 through 61. Finally, I just said, well, come on out and we'll get married at midterm of the first year, 1960, and so that's what we did. I wasn't sure I could live with anyone, but Margaret convinced me that I was wrong about that. And I've been eternally grateful that she was such a tremendously affirmative human spirit. Memories now what's left for me alone to hold of us together, since hers has ebbed away. All those lovely life sounds, that daily dance of laughing games, moving, cooking, loving, sucked away long since by sinister cell chemistry. And even for me, that golden pod of time shines distant and discreet, a dome of life and lightness, a glowing water ball shielding fragrant days of silken glide and taste, double sensation, a sweet and lightsome sharing, now seen far off through smudgy lens from some dark winter wood. There's quite an age difference between Margaret and me. I was 30 when we married, and she was 46. And it didn't matter at first because she was had such a youthful personality anyway, and a very vibrant and vital personality, and had such a wide range of interests from dancing and swimming. She was a water safety instructor, to the life of the mind and everything, and drama, all that sort of thing. There was no difference between us. In many ways, she was much younger than I was. But after the years wore on, after quite a number of years actually, I began to notice certain changes in her. One evening, as we were getting ready for bed, she said to me, "I think it would be quite all right for you to stay tonight, and I don't particularly care what the neighbors think." Well, this just went all over me. I said, "Well, dear," I said, "we're married." She said, "Oh, that's good," and went right ahead with her bed preparations and so forth. And I went outside and to be with myself for a moment. I realized that things would never be the same again. As the mind loses control, it loses also its sense of stability and its idea of emotional home. And eventually I could not rush off to the nearest town to get a few groceries or anything because she would not, she would panic within a very short time, and I would meet her on our home trail when I was coming back, even though I was only gone, let's say, an hour and a half. So I realized then that I could never leave her again. So we stayed as long as we could until she put herself at risk and we had to have a life-saving operation. And after that, of course, there was no question of forever coming back to Frog Bio and to our existence here. During those years in the nursing home, Margaret at first was quite cognizant of me, but later on she began to say things that always affect a person who is close to an Alzheimer's patient. And she would say things like, "Where's my husband? Where's John? I haven't seen that rascal in days." And of course, this sort of shocked me at first. I said, "Why, I'm your husband." And at that particular instance, she looked up at me closely and said, "That's too bad." So I've saved a lot of these, but this did affect me at first rather deeply. It isn't personal, it's the effect of the condition itself. After about 3 years of life in town, helping her to feed, helping her to move and walk, dance, and this sort of thing as long as we could, until her mind no longer trusted anything, didn't even trust my help really. I finally began to resume some of my life down here. It was quite an emotional thing for me to resume more of each week here in the woods after several years of being away. I have a sort of double love for both this rustic situation and life in town. And this is the sort of double life I'm living now. I'm getting 2 stimulations during the week, and at the same time I do feel a certain sense of guilt that I'm not here doing more with raising my food and so forth. A little something. I usually try to stay here and only come in on weekends. So I try to be here 4 or 5 days and in town 2 or 3 days. Well, this weekend I'll be reading some poetry at the Omni Center, so I'm going into town for that. After I decided to take up my life again, I became involved in Omni. This was an NGO which had a triple thrust of peace, justice in society, and ecology. Of course, I was in favor of all those things myself. Although I had been in the Army during the Korean War, I do not believe in killing humans to solve our problems. I think it's the wrong way to be at war with our environment as well. I think it's a wonderful clearinghouse for people who believe in these 3 aspects of society and improvement in them. You know, Archibald MacLeish says a poem should not mean something, but be something. And this has meant a great deal to me. See any of the mechanics of it. But today, there is this urban savage, Winchester barbarian, his cutout buddies, and 4-barrel ants acting out Looney Tunes on Route 66. Flatten that cat, plow that rabbit into the runway until just a wistful lithograph remains. Those Orientals have no respect for life like us. They torture our crew-cut millennial flyboys, you know. Looking to the future, all this is more practice for the cosmic range. In much the same way, raptly chanting numbers and eyeing a scanner screen, tracking sparkling moths in the petals of a nebula, someone we'll shoot live planets. Thank you. It's like taking a shower bath to come back into the woods after all the complication and the frustrations I hear about from people who live there in town. It seems to me as though people are highly stressed these days. There's hardly a neighbor who doesn't have something about his neighbor next door that he would rather change if he could. I don't have that here. I have just the opposite, so that I'm actually many times lonesome for someone of my own species who understands and feels in similar ways, so there's no real conflict. It's only a mile and a third down the trail, so that I get to stop most of the times I get by, although it's getting now so that I don't stop every time. I simply murmur something to her memory and come on. I put a small inscription under her name and dates and said, "A vibrant, loving life," and I put a small frog figure up in the corner of the stone, which didn't mean anything more than frog bio. After a person loses a beloved life partner who gave a lot of structure to one's life, you're suddenly faced with the challenge of a single life. I really had to change a lot. It's a totally different existence. There are, of course, difficult times. As you get older, I'm 81 now, as you get to wake up at 4:48 in the morning and think about all the really nice persons that you knew who are now gone, it's always a rather sobering time, and it's certainly something that I think one should worry about. You should think about the end of life. You should think about becoming stronger as your body becomes weaker, getting the ultimate value that you can out of life with your mind. If you have your memory, you have relative health, and you have a few good friends, when you're beached on the sands of time, I think that's about as much as a great many of us could hope for. The chance of life and the chance of actually being a seeing intelligence is one of the greatest gifts of existence. "What do you people find to do here all day?" my urban friend inquired. And picturing the intense antic and narrow fabric of his own life, all nestled in the humming, cultured fury of the hive, I only shook my head, mulling the ruby-bright events that spice my hours, make a kaleidoscope of feeling, a calendar of colored life. Such rare moments compress my woods hermit days. Into beads I tell over and over like prayers, a spirit diary. Years ago, I was going along a rapid about like this, close to the water, and through a witch hazel thicket. They grow in a splayed out manner, so I had to duck my head, and I ran my face right into a bunch of these little blooms. And sure enough, it turned out to be flowers blooming this time of year, January. So I wrote this poem, Witch Hazel Advent. Sometime in antique winter as I go, kicking a powder scuff of snow by noisy hard blue water, dodging splayed branches with my head, a sudden constellation of spiny yellow stars with blood coronas dances in my gaze. The faintest call, an excuse, a beeswax hint of fossil summers tingles around the crystal air. If this faint scent is not a real one, but just that these crinkly spider stars pluck on some cobweb memory from my elastic life, at any rate, I know them gladly. My being draws a breath and sees past ancient ice down the shoulder of the year toward one more gratis resurrection. It is truly, in a spiritual way, a very beautiful time of year.